Now that we have all of the engineering and structural components out of the way to get us started for this course, we're going to take a brief look at the electronics, so that way you can start building your first robot. So right here I have our Tetrix Prizm Controller. It's our main brain for the robot, and I just want to take this time to quickly talk about how things hook up to make sure nothing gets broken, as this is quite an expensive piece of equipment. Okay, so on the back here we have some data ports. We're going to use these when we hook up our remote controls. So we can ignore those for the time being. But on the front here, we'll see these red and black ports. These allow us to power up things. Okay, so these are very important. Over here on the left, we have our red and green buttons, stop and start. What's nice about the Tetrix programming is when we start using our object-oriented programming to program this robot, we are going to use a piece of code that doesn't start the robot up until this button is clicked. Okay, and then the stop and reset will reset our whole program, which is very useful because we don't have to then go and make another circuit to control our robot. We can just hit these buttons to start and stop our robot. Over here on the left, on the far right, it's kind of hard to see, but if you hold your robot or your Tetrix controller at an angle, you'll see that it's raised and it says sensor ports, and this top left is I2C. We may use these in a future class with a thing called a Grove sensor, but right now you can ignore the I2C port. Next, what we have is a series of analog ports here on the left, and they have A1 through 3. Okay, so A1, A2, A3. And then over here on the right, we have our digital ports, which are what we're going to use for our ultrasonic and line sensors. Then over here on the center, we have servos, and you'll see that it says servos 1 through 6. Okay, and it's kind of hard to see, but there is a positive and negative sign here to make sure everything lines up properly. Remember, positive is red, negative is black. And then at the bottom here, we have these things called CR1 and CR2. So a very common mistake is to plug your servo into these bottom ports. And CR stands for continuous rotation. That's not a servo you have available in your kit. The servos you have are 180-degree servos, so you'd use ports 1 through 6. Okay. And then last but not least, we have these two little adapters here, which we'll use in a future lesson, and these are our encoders. So if I grab my DC motor really quick, I know we've used it in a previous lesson talking about how to physically attach the components, but if I look at the DC motor and look at the far end, you'll notice that there are two sets of cables that come out. One set of cables is this red and black hookup, okay, so that's our power, and the other set of cables is our encoder. The encoder can be used to turn this DC motor accurately. Rather than just powering it up and powering it down, we can actually use the encoder to control the actual physical rotations, which is quite handy when you want accurate turns or accurate lengths of movement. So what's important here is understanding that this motor here, this input, but where we actually connect, is labeled positive and negative, and it links up with the encoder above it. Okay, so I'm going to take my black and red, I'm just going to plug it in, and then I'm going to take my encoder, and the encoder only plugs in one way, and plug that in. Okay, so that would be one motor, two sets of cables. The other motor would come in here, here, and here. Okay, so I'm going to unplug that so it's out of our way, but that's how the motor connects. When we move on to something like the battery, we're going to have to find a home for this big battery on a robot somewhere. Inside the battery itself, we'll talk about this in a future lesson, we do have a fuse, okay, and that fuse just pulls out, and it is a 20 amp fuse. Okay, so we're going to close that back up, and we're going to look at it here and understand that that does not connect anywhere in there. Okay, there's no way to connect that physically to this board. And that's important because this is a really great safety feature. We have to get a switch. Okay, so this is a nice big switch that we have access to. You have to be careful with the plastic so we don't break it, but the switch allows us to power our robot on and off really quickly, so that if something starts misbehaving, we can turn it off really quick. Okay, so we're going to turn it off, and we're going to look at the ends. Okay, so the white ends come together, they only fit in one direction, and then the other end plugs into our battery voltage. Okay, so we just line those up. And now we have a completed circuit. So I'm just going to move this all on screen here. And we can see that we have a completed circuit going from our battery through our fuse, and the red line follows to the switch. This is a rocker switch, so when it's off, there's no connection there. And when it's on, the connection is bridged, sending power to our robotics controller. And there's a little blue light that just showed up here. I'm going to toggle it once more, so there's off, and there's on. Okay, So that's one of the first things you're going to want to do is make sure your battery and switch is available to you and connectable, that everything fits together. Okay, and then we're going to disconnect the switch and talk really briefly about the battery charger. Okay, so one of the first things you're going to want to do while you're working through this video is find your battery and your battery charger. You're going to want to set your battery charger to 0.9 of an amp. That's a slower trickle charge. It lets our battery have a longer life. And then you're going to find the other end, plug it into the wall, pretty simple. And this end you're going to plug into the white. Okay, it takes about a half hour to an hour to charge these up to get them ready. And then you're going to want to keep checking your battery through code to see what is the current rate of power in there, and then every once in a while you're going to charge it up. Okay, so it's easy to sort of keep this this end available. You want to keep it available so that way you can just keep this attached to your robot, use this cord to connect it, and charge your whole robot together. Okay, so when the battery is charging, you cannot code on the controller. When the battery is plugged in through the switch, the controller is available for you to test your coding. I'm going to put that battery controller or battery charger to the side, sorry. I'm going to take this battery and just move it to the side as well, so it's out of our way. Last but not least, we're going to look at, actually I have two things left. We have our servo, which is pretty straightforward. Here's our servo, can connect in nice and easy. Note that red and black, red is positive, black is negative, and yellow is our data. We're going to plug that into any one of these 6 servo ports up here. So just try it out, make sure it fits. One of the common mistakes a student makes in this class is they plug this in backwards. And then they ask me, why is my servo not working? And it's because you have your connection backwards. Okay, now last but not least, you're going to find these cables, okay, in your box. These are the data cables for our ultrasonic sensor. I'll put that there on the table. And our line sensor. You should find these somewhere. Hopefully they're still connected together. The line sensor and the ultrasonic sensor both use these Grove adapters. Okay, so they're universal, they plug right in. They only plug one way, so don't force it. They'll plug in nice and smooth. You can just use your fingernails to just sort of make it snug. When you want to take it out, hold on to all 4 wires firmly and slowly pull it backwards. Okay, and just to show you, it does attach to the other sensor as well. Okay, nice and easy, and then take the whole thing apart. Nice and slow, nice firm pressure. The other end, very simple, just plugs into the data controller. Because these are both digital sensors, we're going to plug in the other end to a digital port. Okay, so this servo, the servo right here, this servo and these 2 sensors use wires to plug in through the interface here. We apply power on the right hand side and we plug in our motors here in the center. Nice and simple, things click together very quick, very easy, so it allows us to focus on actually building a robot and coding the robot.